way I take this, this topic is to try and put it into context. So working in a control function, there are numerous regulatory requirements that we need to implement. Bribery and corruption is just one of those. So to give it the airtime that it deserves and warrants, we have to find a way of trying to communicate with all our employees across the whole firm, senior management right down to bottom level employee. Naturally, they're very busy people. They're not necessarily interested in all that type of regulation, etc. So we need to find a method of trying to communicate and explain this in an effective manner. So the first thing I think of is, well, let's have a concept. A topic can be dull, we can bring it to life through a concept. The second way of looking at it is an analogy. And I've chosen an analogy to do with cars, and you'll come on with that theme. And the third point is pictures. I don't know if you all have children, but if you do, my daughter came home yesterday and she drew a picture. First comment on that picture was, from myself, was, oh, that's great, really brilliant. In my own head, I ain't got an idea what that is. But I'm saying the right messages. Describe it as a tree or something else. She goes, no, that's a picture of you, Daddy. So we can all interpret pictures, views, a payment going through our accounting system in the wrong way without asking the right questions. So I'm going to talk you through a couple of pictures and elaborate on the concept that I want to talk about. So, nice picture of a normal road in London, probably something you've come across today. The analogy that I want you to think of is, think of the vehicle as the firm. Think of the driver as the agent of the firm. The person driving the car is in essence the agent, is acting on behalf of that car. If you follow that concept through and you think of that real life example of driving a car and the damage that can happen if that car goes off the road, that's what this act is trying to achieve. Have we protected the vehicle? So what does a vehicle need? If you own a car, every once in a while you have to go and get that MOT. That's a painful exercise. Whenever I go to get that MOT, the mechanic says it's going to cost. And it does cost. There's always changes. That's changes to process procedures. But ultimately, the car, we all want to get and make sure it passes its MOT, not just once, but on a regular basis. The second element is the driver and also passengers. There's numerous people in that car driving that firm forward, hopefully a very successful car or vehicle. The driver must pass a license. He needs to be appropriately trained to drive that car. Licenses come in very format. So you've got a picture of a motorbike. That might be an example of a sole trader acting on his own behalf on a vehicle. He's not very well protected because it's his own business. Compare that analogy to a bus. The driver of the bus has a different form of license to the driver of the motorbike. So the training and the logic of proving that individual needs to be different. Horses for courses. You've heard that message from our colleagues earlier in the day. It needs to be the right balance. If we continue with this theme, and you can think of any sort of analogy on that road any time, there's public transport, applies to public officials. There's a cab. We've also got within that picture some traffic lights. Couldn't quite get a picture of a traffic light with a red circle, but there's a traffic light saying green, go ahead. The way I think of that is, it's a warning from a regulator, a fine. A fine is going out there and saying, guess what, red, hold on, something's wrong. The Aon fine, that's a good example of a warning signal. How drivers and the firm react to that is up to them. They can go straight through that red light and ignore it, or they can react to it. Look to that Aon fine. Great, lots of lessons learned. So you're utilising that on a daily basis. If we continue with that theme, what are the rules of the game? They're in the highway code. Where's that highway code? Nowhere in that picture. Where's the highway code? Maybe in the glove box, maybe not. It's inbuilt. People and road users know those rules, or they have to know those rules. If they don't, that ain't safe. That ain't the country I want to be in. So if you think about the highway code, there's other rules out there. For example, speeding limits. UK, 70 miles per hour on a motorway. Germany, there ain't none on those autobahns. So different countries have different rules, different drivers. A speeding limit isn't necessarily a way of controlling that we follow the right rules. It's just a flag. You can still drive safely above the speed limit, but at certain circumstances, you still need to drive below that. And the way I like to think of that is the environment. That's a nice sunny day. We don't get a lot of those in England these days, but on that day occasionally it looks quite nice. Imagine that scenario, winter, snow, blizzard. When the external environment changes, guess what? 2 years ago, recession time, that's what we were at. At times of recession, people are under duress to do potentially the wrong activity. People react differently to different environments. So the theme continues throughout. And if you use that concept, you can't go wrong. There's other elements, and we can go on, but there's a few other points I'll throw in. The road is different in different countries. An autobahn in Germany, that's smooth. German efficiency at its best. A Merc on an autobahn, excellent. We've also got some countries, rocky roads. You seen those? Potholes. Where I live, it's full of potholes. Very annoying. But it makes driving across that road very difficult. An example of that might be India. It's normal custom and practice there to make sure there are bribes, even for basic activities, like boarding a train. That's reality. So some roads are more difficult, and the road and the user needs to be aware of that and drive in the appropriate manner. They fail to do that, something's going to go wrong. And when it does go wrong, guess what happens? The vehicle falls off the road. I wouldn't want to be rude to Aon, but in essence that's what happened to Aon. They're the vehicle, it's gone off the road. Hopefully a couple of passengers were not injured. We don't know, but that's the reality of the case. But guess what? That firm, and good credit to them, and I look back to what's been stated by the FSA, their systems and controls are now leading industry practice. That was the message that came out there. The vehicle can be repaired, but an employee sometimes cannot. There's external damage that can happen. So hopefully, what can we do to prevent such an activity? And a softer example is the Toyota. Great brand name. All of a sudden, they've had problems with their firm. So that's a warning out there. So you can still be a roadworthy car, but ultimately there are problems that need to be remedied. Example of that, and the concern with Toyota, well, did they tell US regulators their own problems? Reality, same problem with firms. We mentioned earlier, the authorities want us to communicate problems with them at an early stage. That's a regulatory need. A firm desire is not to be honest. There's a natural aversion to do that, but it's also an inherent need to do that and get on that right footing. There's a balance, and we all need to find that balance.